Right, where's she at? She's hiding at me. Lori, would you like to do the roll call, please?
I will. Calling to order at 6:30. Mrs. Salzer.
Here.
Mrs. Egan.
Present.
Ms. Davenport.
Present.
Mrs. Callen, absent. Mr. Hellman.
Here.
Mrs. Lamel, absent. Mrs. Petropoulos.
Present.
Okay, can we stand for the pledge? Except for the flag. We have a flag. We have a big. Oh, look at this. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag.
The flag of the United States of America
And
and
to
to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
and under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and we have a guest today.
Yes, we have Tammy with us from PMA. And just so you know, Gino is also on this call, but it is really just so that he is in the boardroom in case anyone shows up. But he has told me at this point nobody has come into the district office yet. So I asked him to hang around until about 7 o'clock, and then if nobody else has come, then he can step out. And if anyone comes, I'll greet them when they come. So
Okay.
all right.
Yep. So, is Tammy gonna get started, or?
Well, we have donations to the district.
Okay, do that first.
Yes, and this is the same donation that we had 2 teachers receive last month. You approved a education assistance product voucher from Walmart, and it's something that they applied for. And this time, Mary Ryan, kindergarten teacher at Ridge Lawn, applied and is looking to get that.
Okay. I'm distracted. Wait a minute. I got a dog barking. Riley. Outside.
I feel like this is how every single teacher call has gone this year. Also,
I think they're getting pizza and my dog's barking. Okay. We're gonna vote later on that, right? Or do you want to vote that now? We
need to vote that now.
Okay, we need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second. Elaine seconded, right?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I didn't catch that. Mrs. Petropoulos
Aye.
and Mrs. Egan. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
Ms. Davenport,
Aye.
and Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. Okay, presentations now, right? I lost sound.
So yeah, Adam, there you go.
Tammy from PMA is going to be presenting to us to really continue this discussion on the working cash bonds. And I know we shared the presentation that she has. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And Lori, just so you know, it looks like Tears is entering the meeting now.
Okay, great. Adam, are you sharing the presentation on your screen, or do you want me to share it on mine?
If you're able to, if not, I can pull it up real fast, whatever works.
Either way, I know if I'm going to do it, you've got to give me permission to share. So whatever you prefer.
All right, let me go ahead and grab it real quick.
Okay. So maybe while he's doing that, I'll just make a couple opening comments. I know it's crazy to think that the last time I saw you was on March 14th, which was the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis. I think actually that day you were, maybe we were going to have 1 or 2 more days of school, and look where we are now. So thank you for having me at your meeting tonight. I know you have some items on your agenda for approval related to the bonds that I will address a little bit later. But once the PowerPoint is up, I will take you through that first, and then I'll speak to the action items again that are in front of you tonight at the end of the presentation.
Okay, are we ready to go?
I think so. There we go. Great.
Good?
Thank you. Yes, thanks so much. So if we want to go, and I think you have to drive for me, right, Adam?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk about a few different topics tonight related to your bonds. One is I do want to give you an update on the bond market because it has been pretty interesting since we met a couple months ago at the district office. And then I have a few options to show you based on a $5 million working cash bond issue. We are looking for a direction from the board as to which option you prefer to proceed with. And then I have some information on costs of issuance just so that you have an understanding of all the parties involved in this transaction and how they'll be compensated. And then I'll talk for a few minutes about the method of sale or how we sell the bonds to investors. And then we'll review the timetable for the financing over the next few months. So first we'll talk about the bond market. Needless to say, it has been fairly volatile, and there's a graph coming up on a couple slides, I think, Adam.
That's the one you're looking for?
It didn't change on my screen.
It's got the historical tax exempt interest rates. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Do you all see that on your screen? Okay, I don't see it on mine. So hold on, I'm gonna just pull up my copy while I'm flipping through it. It'll work. And Adam, you can still drive for me. That would be great. Okay, so looking at what is slide 4 is, as you said, historical tax exempt interest rates. So we may have looked at this chart back in March, but there's a lot going on this slide. So let me give you perspective and what the main takeaways are here.
Okay.
The gray shaded area in the back is showing you what the Fed has done with short-term interest rates. And of course, if you look right in the middle of the page at the bottom, you'll see that there's a flat spot, which represents the Great Recession. And then to the right, how interest rates on the short end were raised by the Fed over a couple of years. And then obviously we've been in an environment where they've been dropping them over the last year or so. The different colored lines represented in purple, green, red, and blue are showing you different points on the yield curve going out to 20 years for what we call the Municipal Market Data Index, or the MMD. The MMD is like the municipal bond market version of the Dow Jones Industrial. So it's our way to track what the trends are in the municipal bond market, because whether you're a school district in Cook County, Illinois, or any other type of issuer of bonds, your bonds will sell relative to or at a spread to what the index is telling us is going on at any given point. So this goes back to 2003, and you can see ups and downs in the market over that long period of time. But let's look at slide 5, because this is a more focused view of what's happened just since January, because it's really hard on the prior slide to see the ups and downs. It's all kind of mushed together. So on this slide 5, we're going back just to January, and we've got the 3 different lines there. And if you look right where that dip is, the lowest point in history for municipal bond rates was right at the time we had your meeting at your office on March 14th. And once that COVID-19 crisis started to kick in, you can see that over the period of a couple weeks, interest rates spiked significantly, over a full percentage point in a matter of just a few days. They came back down, they went back up, and really since the beginning of April, we have seen a more normalized market environment. And while interest rates are not nearly as low as they were back in early to mid-March, they're pretty close. So even though we've had this market volatility, it's important to know that we are near historical lows. When rates were skyrocketing, when COVID-19 went into effect a couple months ago, not only did we have that impact, but we also had the fact that investors across the country said, wait a minute, like all of us, what is going on with this COVID-19? What does this mean for my personal portfolio? I'm not going to buy any stocks. I'm going to hang on to my cash. I might put some of it under my pillow. I'm just nervous and I don't know what to do. The same thing happened in the municipal bond market. Investors who typically buy municipal bonds said, we're going to step back. So all sorts of issuers throughout the country that were gearing up to sell bonds suddenly couldn't sell them. So it really took about a month, getting into the middle of April, where investors started saying, okay, we'll focus on the bond market again and we will buy municipal bonds. So that is great. So not only have rates improved, but the investor base has opened up again and bonds are being sold in the market on a daily basis. And the issues that have stronger credit ratings are the ones that are most attractive to investors. I mean, that's true all the time, but especially right now. And we'll talk a little bit later about your credit rating that we'll have to update for this bond issue, but you have a very strong credit rating. So that's going to bode well once you're able to enter the market. Okay, with that being said, let's move on to the financing options. And so I'm on slide 7, and with the direction from Adam and Kathy that the board would like to proceed with a $5 million non-referendum bond issue for capital projects, we put together these 3 options, which I'll show you in detail in a minute. The first one is what we call an accelerated issue, meaning let's pay these bonds off as fast as we can within the constraint of the debt service extension base, or the DSEB, as we talked about back in March. The next one is a payment structure with 20 years of level payments. So it spreads the payments out over a longer term. So the initial impact on the homeowner is different, right? Because their annual payment's smaller. So you have, in your case, a greater reduction in tax bills than the first scenario. But over time, that option is going to cost more in interest because we're paying it off over a longer term. And then the third scenario is kind of a hybrid of the first 2. And it might just be easier to, when we get to that slide, I'll show you what I mean by that. But it tries to kind of achieve the best of both worlds between the first 2 scenarios. So if we look at slide 8, this is the accelerated debt service option. So let me just remind everybody what these different bars and lines mean on this chart. So anything that's in dark blue, those 2 columns on the left, represent existing debt service on bonds the district has at this time. The light blue bars represent payments on the $5 million non-referendum working cash bond issue. That red solid line going across is representative of where the district's DSEB is right now, which is right about $500,000. The red dotted line is representative of the DSEB growing at the pace of 1.5% per year. You may remember when we talked in March, we discussed the fact that you're allowed under the law to increase your DSEB every single year by the CPI. So we've used a 1.5% average growth over time. In this scenario, with putting those light blue bars up as high as we can, paying the bonds off as quickly as we can, the final payment on these bonds would be in levy year 2034. So you're not fully tapping your DSEB, you're only going to go out to 2034. And by the way, I have a summary chart coming up for all these 3 options that provides an analysis on the homeowner impact as well as the debt service cost comparison. So we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, I saw that earlier.
Okay, slide 9 looks at the structure with a 20-year payback. So as I said, because we're stretching it out purposefully over 20 years, the annual debt service payment is going to be under that red solid line. And if you look at those light blue bars now, the annual payments are just under $400,000 per year. So not as much as the last slide where they were $500,000 per year. And then the third scenario is that hybrid option that I mentioned, which I'm looking at now on slide 10. So the approach or the philosophy here is let's try to, for the first 5 years of the bonds, let's fully tap the DSEB, go up as high as we can to the red solid DSEB line there for 5 years. But we know as a board, you have more projects to do down the road. You've got a long range master plan that your architect has developed for you. And maybe in about 5 or 6 years, you'd be in a position as a board to want to issue more DSEB bonds. You want to give yourself flexibility. So in this option, again, for 5 years, we have payments going up to that red line. And then starting in levy year 2026, the payments drop considerably to roughly $325,000 or so, leaving room. So if you want to sell more bonds as a board in that 2025, 2026 timeframe, you know you have some room within your DSEB and you'd have that flexibility. So when I look at slide 11 in the comparison between the 3, in the first line, we have the estimated net debt service cost. So total over all the years the bonds are paid back. And in scenario 1, as I mentioned, that's going to be the most cost effective because you're paying the bonds off as quickly as you can at just under $6.6 million, okay? And in scenario 2, again, paying them back over 20 years with lower annual payments, but it will take longer to pay them back. So it's about $7.4 million. So a difference of roughly $800,000 or so in the debt service cost over time. And then in scenario 3, just as you might expect, the debt service cost, principal and interest over time is right between scenarios 1 and 2 because we're trying to kind of capture the best of both worlds. Then I provided for you the estimated TIC for each option. TIC stands for true interest cost, which is representative of the true borrowing rate to the district from selling the bond. So it's not just the interest rates that you pay, but the other costs of issuance. And you can see what the differences are in the 3 of those, which really align to the difference in the debt service costs that I shared with you. And then we have the estimated change in the tax rate from levy year 20 to levy year 21. Scenarios 1 and 3 are very similar because, again, we're trying to fill up the payments against the DSEB in that first year. So that tax rate's going to drop by about 20 or 21 cents, meaning someone with a $200,000 market value home, their property tax bill will drop by about $100 versus scenario 2, where my payment in the first year on the bonds and for the life of the bonds is going to be closer to about $400,000. So my reduction in my tax rate is bigger. It's about 27 cents or about $132 on a $200,000 market value home. So hopefully this helps you kind of visualize what the differences are in terms of borrowing cost, in terms of the tax rate impact, as well as the impact on the homeowner. I know you're thinking about some of those different variables, and really the board has to decide, what's the most important thing? Do you want to have a lower total borrowing cost? Do you want to have a lower debt service payment so that the tax rate and the homeowner impact is more significant? Or do you want a blend of the two? That's really kind of what we're trying to show you tonight to give you some options. Okay, if we go to the next section, which is costs of issuance, in slide 13, as we typically do whenever we're given the green light to assemble the team for the financing, we pull together all the costs of issuance. And so we have PMA listed at the top there as your financial advisor, and as well as the work that we do on your OS. OS, by the way, stands for official statement. That is the offering document or the prospectus that goes to various investors, as well as bond counsel and disclosure counsel, which the district would be represented by Chapman and Cutler out of Chicago. And the district does have prior experience working with Chapman and Cutler in that capacity. We also need to get a credit rating for the bonds, which is listed from S&P, provided there at $15,500. They have a set fee schedule that's purely based on the amount of bonds that you sell. And then there's a few other smaller line items that are listed there. So total estimated cost of issuance for the transaction is just under $75,000. And I should mention that all costs of issuance related to the bond sale are paid through the bond issue itself. The district does not have to write checks to pay out of existing fund balance. Through the bond sale itself, we generate funds to pay the costs of issuance. The district would still secure $5 million for projects, but we're also able to generate funds to pay these costs. Okay, moving on to the method of sale on slide 15. So there are different ways to enter the market and identify investors. And if we look at slide 15, there's two most common methods are what we call a direct placement or a public offering. A direct placement is one in which there might be a local bank, for example, that raises its hand and says, I want to buy all the bonds from the school district. And there are reasons why sometimes that's a good option, particularly for bond issues that are shorter, meaning they have maturities of 10 years or less. You're looking at something that's, depending on the structure you all like, it could be 14 years, it could be 20 years. So you're outside of that sweet spot for that type of option. We're focusing on the public offering approach, which means the bonds are offered to lots and lots of different investors. And there are two types of public offerings. One is called a competitive sale, and one is called a negotiated sale. A competitive sale is similar in concept to the competitive bidding process that you have for other things at the district all the time. We're doing the same thing here. Through an electronic format, we submit or solicit bids, and different underwriters or firms that make their living buying and selling bonds on behalf of issuers like school districts, they submit a bid within a 15-minute window to PMA to buy your bonds at a particular date. So we then accept all those bids within that 15-minute window, and once that time frame has expired, we have a list of bids, and whoever provides the lowest interest rate to the district is the one that wins your bonds. It's as simple as that. Sometimes there's a negotiated sale instead, where the district would identify or select an underwriter to buy your bonds and sell them to investors. And because we would need to identify that firm early in the process, PMA, as your financial advisor, would prepare a request for proposals, send those out to various underwriting firms, get those back, we evaluate them, look at several criteria, and then ultimately deliver a recommendation to the board as to which firm it might select. Let's go to slide 16 if we could. This is a view of credit rating scales. And there are 4 that are listed there. The 2 on the right, Fitch and Kroll, they really don't rate school districts in Illinois at all. Moody's and S&P again stands for Standard & Poor's. Those 2 rating agencies by far have the most ratings on school districts in Illinois than any other company. You have an outstanding credit rating from your last bond issue with S&P at what's called the AA- level, circled there in green, which is an excellent credit rating. You know, of course, the highest possible credit rating is what's the AAA, and then we get into that AA category, which you are part of. You're on the low end of the AA category, but it's an excellent credit rating. And there are lots of reasons why we think about competitive versus negotiated sale, which one makes more sense. And when we go to slide 17, what you'll see is that there are different reasons why you would select a competitive sale versus a negotiated sale. So in a competitive sale, that's most appropriate when there's an issuer like you that has a really strong credit rating, when there's a pretty straightforward bond issue, just like you have in this case, and when the bond issue doesn't have any strange or special features that need a lot of explanation. Another reason you would use a competitive sale is when the market is pretty stable and there's nothing crazy going on in the world. Then we want to be sure that in a competitive sale that your transaction is going to get the maximum amount of attention because the markets are calm. A negotiated sale is more appropriate when the issuer doesn't have a strong credit rating, when there's a story to tell, when we need bond salespeople on the phone talking to investors to tell the story of the district. It's also really appropriate when there is a more volatile environment. Since COVID-19 went into effect in the middle of March, we have seen more negotiated sales by far than we have seen competitive sales. Up until 2 months ago, nearly every bond issue we were bringing into the market for our school district clients, nearly all of them were competitive sales. But we have, over the last month or so, as I said, they have been negotiated sales just because the markets have been a little more difficult to navigate. At this point in time, I am not in a position to tell you whether I would advise a competitive or negotiated sale, simply because by the time your transaction hits the market, you know, we're looking at July. So we're looking at over 2 months away. And at this point, we don't have to make a decision about that. But I'm going to keep watching the market, and I will come back to you with a decision. And if it's a recommendation to proceed with a negotiated sale, then we would send out that RFP, like I mentioned earlier, deliver it to the administration to share with all of you, and then you could take board action on that recommendation prior to the sale of the bonds. So if we go to the last section and look at slide 19, I did just want to go over this timeline with you and give you a sense of what will transpire over the next few months. And anything that's in bold font represents something that will occur, you know, via board action. So like tonight, you have 2 resolutions on your agenda. It's a resolution of intent and a resolution calling a public hearing. So with the resolution of intent, you are declaring your intent as a board to sell up to $5 million in working cash bonds. And the resolution calling a public hearing means you're informing the public that you intend to hold a hearing at your board meeting on May 26th. Now, per the law, with approval of both of those resolutions tonight, notices of intent and the public hearing have to hit the newspaper within a certain time frame. So those 2 notices will hit the newspaper on May 14th.
Okay.
moving along on the schedule, then you'd have that hearing on May 26th. We'd also have what's called the 30-day petition period then expire on June 14th. We talked about this, I believe, back at the March meeting, but once the notice of intent hits the newspaper, it starts a 30-day clock. And if during the 30 days, at least 10% of the registered voters sign a petition and bring it to the board, that's their attempt to stop the bond sale. Not likely that that's going to happen, but I just wanted to alert you to the fact that that petition period would expire on June 14th. Then you have a board meeting on June 23rd, which you could actually at that point approve a parameters resolution for the sale of the bonds. And if we recommend a negotiated sale, we would be teed up to bring that recommendation to you on June 23rd. The alternative to that would be me telling you on June 23rd, we're going to go with a competitive sale. So again, that part of the decision tree is still somewhat fluid. But we expect to be in the market in mid-July, close on the transaction in early August, and that's when the district would actually receive the $5 million in working cash bond proceeds for your projects and be ready to spend those funds. So thank you for bearing with me. I know I've given you a lot of information, and of course, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have on the presentation here. Oh, I'm sorry, there is one more thing on your agenda I neglected to mention. It's an approval of an amendment to PMA's financial advisory agreement. So last summer, we presented the administration with a financial advisory agreement between the district and PMA, which, because PMA was starting to provide the district with some advice and options for borrowing, the regulatory requirement that we live within at PMA said, you need to give the district an agreement in writing. And it was written very, very broadly, covered all the bases because you didn't know yet as a district exactly what type of financing you'd enter into. So last month when I had a chance to talk with Adam and Kathy, and they shared with me that you want to proceed with $5 million of working cash bonds, that provided the specificity we needed to provide an amendment to that financial advisory agreement from last summer. So the amendment spells out in greater detail now what the financing plan is and the scope of services we provide. Our fees are listed in there as well. So we have to give that to you, and then that needs to be executed and returned to PMA per the regulators. So I just wanted to mention that because I'd forgotten that in my comments earlier. So I'll stop finally and see if you have any questions.
Okay, I have a question. Is it okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When you were listing the different ways of paying it back, under what category? There's 3 different categories, you said?
3 different options?
Options, yes.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Okay. Now, considering that we're going to have some issues probably with the state regarding financing, I mean, everybody can figure out that could be a mess. If we choose one, are we stuck with that the whole time, or is there wiggle room to switch over if something happens?
Great question. When you sell bonds, what happens is the debt service payments are established,
Right.
and documents are filed with the county clerk, and it directs the county clerk that over the life of the bond issue, you need to extend property taxes every single year to pay those bonds back.
Right.
Unless you as a board do something else to change that structure, that's what they will levy. You would always have the option to restructure your bond payments. You could, shorten them, extend them. There are different things that you could do to change that plan.
Okay.
But if I'm reading into your question a little bit more, you certainly can think about, well, which one of these maybe gives me the most flexibility. So for example, while scenario 2 is the one that costs the most, I know my annual payments are less, and I as a board, we have more flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
So that if something changes with the state, they don't give us funding, or suddenly we're not as comfortable as a board using as much fund balance for capital projects, then that might be the way to go, just because you feel like you've got more room should you need to borrow for something else in a couple of years.
Yeah. And once we choose a scenario, I don't necessarily want to change. It's just that I'm very leery, or I'm skeptical, only because of what's happening now. And what the future holds. So I just want to make sure that we have the possibility if needed.
Understood. Yes.
We've always been very good about sticking to what we do, so, but like I said, we don't know what's gonna happen.
I completely get it. Yep.
Okay,
So-
I have one more quick question.
Okay.
How long, when you put the bonds up for sale, they're up for sale for how long?
So if we do a competitive sale, what happens is we send out the preliminary official statement, or that POS, which is the prospectus I described earlier,
Mhm.
approximately a week to 10 days before the bond sale. So that
Okay.
investors, the underwriters, can look at it, understand the district, understand your financing plan, and basically reach an informed investment decision. So on the day that we actually sell the bonds, we accept bids for 15 minutes. So it's
Okay.
actually kind of rapid fire. For kind of bond geeks like me, I love watching the bids come in. It's kind of like eBay for bonds. It's very exciting from my point of view. If we do a negotiated sale, we still send out that POS a week to 10 days before, but on the day of the sale, and the reason that it's called a negotiated sale is because there's ongoing dialogue or negotiation between the underwriter and PMA, and the district is part of the conversations as well, about where the interest rates on the bond should be. So the underwriter might say, we think that the interest rate on the 2025 maturity should be 1.5%. And it's my job to go back and say, you know, I'm looking at all this market intel and I think it should be a 1.4%. I want you to go back and talk to the investors and sharpen the pencils.
Oh, okay.
And that order period, as we call it, usually lasts somewhere between an hour and a half to 2.5 hours. So
Okay.
we can spend a good part of the day that we're selling the bonds in the market, finalizing the structure and figuring out the terms.
Okay.
Tiffany, you had a question?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm trying to remember all of our conversations in these last couple of meetings that we've had, but I felt like what we came to last month was that we were going to be going to bonds for, I mean, now you're talking $5 million, and I know we talked about doing like part in bonds and part from the what's it called? You know, the
Working.
savings.
Yeah,
Was it called?
fund balance.
Reserve.
From the fund balance. But I thought that we were still going to be selling bonds to the amount of like a zero gain or loss at taxpayers, but all those scenarios seem to be like, what I don't want is to tell people they've got, you know, $100 or $129, and then in a couple of years we're raising taxes again over something else. And I did think we were trying to be at like a zero, plus or minus.
Understood. All of these scenarios, whether you're looking at scenario 1, 2, or 3, are going to result in a reduction in property taxes in the first year. And Adam, maybe if we look at, you could look at any of them, but why don't we look at scenario 1, that bar chart again for a minute?
Let me find it. Sorry, do you know what page that is?
Try.
Number 8,
Yeah, I would say 7 or 8, probably 8.
slide 8. I got mine open on a Chromebook
Okay.
next to me. That's why I can see it.
Okay, great, thank you. So looking at this one, so see where the light blue bars are, right? They're going up to that $500,000 level every single year. So in the first year, someone's property tax bill is going to drop by approximately $100. Whatever that payment then becomes for bonds for the district is going to stay at that level for the life of the bond issue. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So each year they'll continue to have a reduction, or no? It's
No.
just
Well,
it stays there.
they'll experience the reduction in the first year. So let's just, for simple math, maybe your bond payment, your portion of the tax bill goes from $400 to $300.
Okay.
Okay, then your payment will stay at $300 for the life of the issue.
Okay, so in regards to the bond, there's no more increase in taxes. If we get a raise in taxes, it's from something else,
Right,
not from the bond.
correct. That's right. Your levy might go up otherwise because of your operating levy, for example, but it will not go up because of the bonds.
Okay. Is that answer your question, Tiffany? Oh, I can't.
Here, let me unmute you.
I thought we were trying to work within not raising or lowering the tax amount. So
They're
that's
not going to see that $100 1 year. I don't think they're going to see it. 90% of the people are in escrow anyway. The stuff that we increase somewhere else probably will offset it and it'll look like a flat thing across the board.
And I think in order for our taxes to be consistent, we would virtually have to go for $8 or $9 million in working cash bonds. And I don't think we wanted to commit to that.
Right.
Yeah, you actually can't sell that much because of where your DSEB is. That red line went across. But Kathy, you're correct. You'd have to borrow about $9 or $10 million, and that would mean a referendum. That's the only way you could borrow that much and increase the annual payments or keep them level like Tiffany is suggesting.
Okay.
I think what we will have to make sure that we watch, though, is if we go where we're still allowing some flexibility within our DSEB, that's when, if we go and sell more, am I right, Tammy, that's when we could see an increase again if we sold more later on?
Well, let's go. Can you go forward 2 slides? Let's look at scenario 3, because I think that's kind of the scenario that you're talking about.
It is, yeah.
If you did this one,
I don't like that one.
you'd be in a similar spot because you are not going to raise them from where they are. So for example, in this option, we're keeping the payments. You're still going to have a reduction in tax bills. The payments are going to be, in that example, as I said, your tax bill goes from $400 to $300. It's going to stay at $300 for 5 years. Then in 2026, if the board does nothing, then that taxpayer would have another reduction in his or her property tax bill because the payment's dropping again in 2026. But if the board at that point said, I want to sell more bonds, and would agree to keeping the payments back up at that solid red line with the new bonds not going above that red line, you're going to continue to have a tax bill of $300 per year.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't raise taxes at that point. It would prevent a drop.
Okay. That makes
Yeah, I don't know. This is Tirza. You know what? I looked at all of these before, and I see all the advantages to each one. But I'll be honest with you. I know it sounds funny, but I really do like the scenario 1 because it does keep it across the board, but it allows us to be going back out and redoing and doing a total reset or a re-oof like we're doing now in 2034 versus all the way in 2039. And I mean, and I just think that we can be really good about what we know. We have a certain amount of time that we have to use this bond money in, and then we would know whether or not we would be, going towards, some of our reserves or whatever. But I don't know. I mean, all part of me says best bet is to, pay down debt faster than lower, and by doing it with that 5-year accelerated, that in 5 years we're going to be turning around doing the same thing and saying, oh, but we don't want people to decrease because then it'll be up again. Whereas like if you stay at that 1, they get that 1 decrease of 100, it stays out there, yet we pay off this debt significantly earlier and be able to decide at that point, after we've already spent basically $10 million, 5 from our reserve stuff and this $5 million here, decide where we're at a better time of what do we need to do now in our district. Because you know what, by 2034 things could really change. We're talking about 14 years. The kids who are in Findlay could be having children by then. Frightening.
Can I ask a question in regards to what Tirza said? Tirza, basically what you're saying is that like your fear then is that if we wait till 2034,
39.
Oh. I'm sorry, 2039. But aren't the other ones indicating though that we have wiggle room? So I know what you're saying that
the wiggle coming on red.
I gotta look at the
that
graph.
red dotted line, that
Yes.
wiggle is built in there. The red line, from what I understand, unless I'm wrong, Tammy, the red line is where we're at now.
Right.
We will already be getting that wiggle room with the dotted line. That's making some extrapolation of 1.5%. We're still always going to have that wiggle room.
That's true. Yes.
Okay. That wasn't clear to me because I mean, like the way you were saying it, I thought it pays it off earlier, but then we don't have that room to sell more bonds. That's what I was taking from this, that in the other scenarios, there's still room to sell more bonds if need comes. But in that first case scenario, we don't have that option then, correct?
You don't have nearly as much as you do with scenarios 2 and 3. because you will, by the time you might sell more non-referendum bonds, whatever that might be, as was mentioned, you're going to get continued CPI growth in the DSEP. But to be honest with you, I think we could have a 0 CPI in levy year 21. We could have a couple years, if not more, of unfortunate CPIs because of what's going on right now in terms of how long is it going to take the economy to recover.
Right.
But so you are right, Chrissy, and so is Tirza. So scenarios 2 and 3 definitely give the board more flexibility should you decide in the next few years you want to sell more bonds for other projects. If you go with scenario 1, while the cost is lower, your hands are more tied from selling more bonds. You can do it, but it'd be a lot more expensive if you wanted to try to do something in a few years because you'd have to restructure what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Scenarios 2 and 3 are more appropriate if you think there's any chance I need to sell some more bonds in a shorter time frame.
When does the decision on the 3 scenarios need to take place?
It does not have to happen tonight. If we could have it, May 26th would be great. But if we got to June 23rd, that would also be okay, but May 26th would be ideal.
And Tammy, with interest rates being at historical lows, would it make more sense to go with possibly option 2?
I understand what you're saying. Yes, if all things considered, providing flexibility and locking in low rates, this is the time to do it if you're going to borrow over a longer term. Yes, that's right.
So even though scenario 1 costs us substantially less money, and I'm all for that, looking at that DSEB line and the uncertainty of the economy and what they're doing with the state, quite honestly, the less wiggle room, if you will, makes me a little nervous. I know we are in a very strong financial position, but I just wanted to share that.
But here's my question, Kathy. I've been on and off the board, and we have never gone to bond in my whole time I've been here. You're talking about going to a bond in a shorter period of time, which we really even haven't. I mean, I'm just saying we're giving ourselves wiggle room that we haven't even utilized up to this point. What are the chances that we would?
You're absolutely right, Tirza. And if we had to go out for bonds in, let's say, 5 years or something, I think we would have some bigger issues because those would be probably for operating rather than, fancy chairs for the students. So I think we would be in a very different picture, but you are correct.
So Tirza, you're still sticking with 1?
You know what? I like 1 because it's the thing. I'm a firm believer. I like 1 because it gets paid off faster. We save money. We are, the whatever you want to call it. We're the people. We have a fiduciary duty to do what we need to do for the district, and that does save us money. True, it does not give us wiggle room. But you also know sometimes when there's wiggle, that means some decisions aren't made maybe as well as they should be. When you have a budget, it's amazing how well things get done. Then we got a little bit of room, and then it might not be as good. I know we have been very good about, getting our stuff done. So that's why I'm thinking that. And then you've got a whole reset or a whole, everything is done by 2034, and you reset the clock again, almost like how we're doing now of, hey, we know these ones are coming up, let's do this again. So that's the main reason why I like 1. I'll be honest with you, 2 would be good as well. Just the whole fact that it's a one down, but that it's consistent. I will tell you, you will have a really hard time for me to pick scenario 3 because you're going to have a decrease, and then in 5 years, you're going to have another decrease. Good luck ever getting that money back again from anybody.
I agree with you there.
Yeah, I agree.
That's my own personal opinion. Number 3 should be out the door.
Elaine, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, of the 3, number 1 is the one that I am most hesitant to be inclined to pick. I don't like the idea of not having as much, everyone's using the term wiggle room, so I guess I'll use that word semantically too. I think between the 3 of them, number one ties our hands the most, and that makes me extremely concerned. And in as much as someone could say, well, we've never done X before, we've also never had a situation like we're in right now before. I don't think anyone can ever foresee what could possibly happen in the future. And I think in as much as you don't want to max out your ability to expand, number one makes me nervous. Number two and number three, I think, are very user friendly. I personally like number three. I think it's a good middle road between both extremes. I think it kind of has the benefit of both. But I really don't like number one.
Okay.
What? Go ahead, Nance.
Okay, I understand what Elaine is saying, but if and personally, I mean, I'll go with the majority on this, but I have to agree a lot with what Tears is saying, and about paying it off sooner. I always do that. I always pay off everything as soon as I can. And from what we said before, Tammy, if we had an issue, we can renegotiate it. Am I right?
You may restructure it, yes.
Restructure it. Now, is there big charges involved if we restructure it? I don't want to put that out as something. Okay, we can do this if, and then there's these obnoxious costs going along with that.
Yeah.
So what happens at that point if we decide to do that?
It honestly depends on when you would do it. If you did it the next year or two, it could be very costly, just because you're restructuring some bonds that really aren't intended to be restructured that soon. If you did it in 6 or 7 or 8 years, the cost would be pretty minimal to do something like that. In fact, you might, depending where interest rates are down the road, it could be analogous to refinancing a mortgage on your house and having some benefit from doing that in terms of lower costs.
If I'm not mistaken, and you might know this, Tammy, and if not, Kathy, you might. When we had our last loan, I remember Sue doing something where she restructured it or something because we paid off more. We paid off an extra amount. Kathy, you remember something about that?
Yeah, I wasn't here for that, but I do remember that our initial bond issuance went out, obviously almost 20 years ago.
Right, and then about 5-6 years ago, they
restructured at a better interest rate and saved a lot of money.
A lot of money.
Yes.
Okay, Is that still a possibility, Tammy?
With these bonds, there's no question a significant portion of them will be what we call callable, which means you're communicating to investors when you sell them now that you're reserving the right to refinance them down the road. Now, there are some federal tax law restrictions as to when you can do that, but you would have the ability to refund, as we call it, any of those maturities that are callable, and those are the ones that would be eligible for some savings in the market. And as you said, that's what you did in 2011. You did a refunding of previously.
I knew there was something like that. But it was like, it has to be further down the road where you have proven yourself being this fiscal responsible group, and you have done your due diligence for a number of years before you got to that point. Am I right? Am I saying it right?
You are on the right track. Yes.
Okay.
So here's my question. I know with the another one is, as the state gives us, pays off this debt, there is that portion that we will be getting over and above that we have always put away. That's the little, so on this $5 million that we have, how much are we talking is going to be being banked as we go? That's another thing, because that's what you guys funded a big chunk of the STEM labs with.
The county will give us 5% each year on the amount we levy.
You're talking about that we were able to spend the interest that we earned then on that money. Am I right? Would you say it?
It's the same concept. It's not really interest earned. It is the amount of money that the county gives us in excess of
that one. Okay.
In case we don't collect 100%.
Yes, I get it. I remember. Yeah.
And so
you're talking about $250,000 a year?
Well, if, let's say our bond payment, I'm just looking at this.
Oh, the bond payment, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the full
Right,
bond.
if our bond payment was 400,000, an additional 5% would be 20,000 extra dollars a year.
One bit of news that has been, Kathy and I receive projections from people of what the state's really going to look like in the future. And one of the projections we received this week was that it would be down 33.33%, the education budget. And when Kathy did the projections, that for us is about $1.5 million next year that we could be losing. Obviously, we're talking different funds for a lot of this, but that is something that we just need to keep in mind. I think 33.33 is on the way extreme end of what we could possibly see for next year. I think within the next couple years, that could be very realistic. But that pretty much wipes out any evidence-based funding money that we've received over the last 2 years. So as we are thinking about this over the next couple weeks and trying to decide which scenario fits us best, it is crucial that we remember that we are in unprecedented times. And I know I am one who wants to pay off debt as quickly as possible and would prefer never to have to go out for debt. But we also, I think, have to just be really realistic of the times that we're in right now.
Right.
Yeah, because too, and you and I discussed this, Adam, we added new positions like the assistant principals and a few other things that we've added that we're now going to have to pay out of pocket and not from that extra money when we lose it, which we.
That's why I brought up the idea of the fancy term wiggle room, because we don't know what's going on in the world. It's like, I remember thinking a month ago, things will be fine in a month, and we're not there. And
No.
I mean, what is school going to look like next fall? And I know that's a whole nother conversation, but we're talking about a whole new world of education possibly. So it does make me nervous not to have the ability. You know, I know that, Nancy, you're saying we've never done this before.
Right.
We've
No, I know
never
what you're
had this.
Yeah,
We've never had this type of situation across the globe before.
right.
And so that's where I kind of agree with Elaine in the sense that it makes me nervous a little bit. So that's why I asked the question and was on the fence about it as well.
Yeah, it's totally understandable, you know.
But
and I totally forgot about that.
But the other thing is, though, is that I understand you're talking about, well, you don't know what it's going to look like. Somehow we need to operate within that. These bonds and the things that are our operating budget, that is not to operate the school. The reserves, this bond, this is not to pay a teacher. This is not to pay a principal. This is to do capital projects. This is like a one and done. If you start using our reserves and you start using the bonds to do regular operating, we will be bankrupt.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it.
I didn't mean it in that sense, I guess. I just meant it that, like, what if there's a capital project that comes up that has to fit this new way that school might look? That's the only thing, you know, just because with such a, like, I hate the word unprecedented times, but that's what it is. So, and I don't know, I'm not saying any one of the scenarios is correct. I just feel like it's something that we need to think about a little bit more personally. I'm not, yeah.
That's what the reserves are there for. So I agree with Tirza on scenario one. Can you go back and just show us again the cost of each of these three scenarios?
Yes, I think that's like 7.
Cost over time.
6.5,
Can
2
someone tell
is
me
7.4, and 3 is
11.
this one here?
Yep.
yeah, side 11.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge difference just to have extra years to pay off debt when who knows in 14 years or 20 years what we're going to even want to be doing at that time. So I'm with Tirza that the cost of scenario one is much more appealing. It's already giving us, I mean, it's giving the same amount now for projects. It's already giving the amount of difference that taxpayers are seeing is negligible. I don't see why we would.
It's almost $1 million.
2 or 3. That's huge.
So we would be paying less than we're paying now, am I right?
For annual payments, yes, that's correct.
Yes.
So we would be paying less.
Yes.
we wouldn't be paying more. So
No,
yeah,
the cost of the loan over the time is over $1 million more for scenario 2 and
no,
scenario
that's what
3.
no, I was talking about the yearly payment, Tim.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yes, that so we really do have to think this out carefully because the extra is a lot too. There's a lot of stuff to think about.
It's almost like when you do a mortgage on a house, you can't, it's hard to believe that only 5 years worth of difference is going to be over $1 million. It's kind of like making an extra mortgage payment at the beginning versus paying it at the end when all you're doing is paying your damn principal.
Where are you seeing over $1 million?
If you look from if you look on number 11,
Yeah.
okay, the estimated net debt service, if you do scenario 1, only costs $6,580,000. Scenario 2 is $7,437,000.
$100,000 more.
Yeah, almost $1 million more.
Kept saying it's over $1 million more for each. It's not.
It's almost $1 million between 1 and 2.
But 3 is less.
Okay, so it's $600,000. Still, it's over $500,000.
With room for peace of mind.
So does anyone have any other questions for Tammy at this point? Obviously, this is something I think we're going to have to continue to look at now that we have the graphs and the numbers in front of us. And hopefully we can come up with a decision within the next couple of weeks. But if not, it sounds like we do have a little more room if needed.
Tammy, do you have a gut feeling on anything?
You talking to me, Tirza?
No, I asked Tammy. Tammy, do you have a gut feeling on anyone that, based on, I know it's hard to decide the economy because it's like all up in craziness, but do you have any feel for it since you've been in this business a heck of a lot longer than we have known anything about this?
Sure. I think too about when we met in March and looked at your long-term plan that was presented, your capital plan, and how you have other points in time in the future where you'll have to, because the projects were put in kind of different phases. And the first phase is roughly a 4 or 5 year phase. And then there's another one for about the same period of time. And you're going to have to make decisions in the future as a board about how much of those projects you'll fund and how much you might pay for with fund balance and how much you might have to finance with bonds. For that reason, I think scenario 3 is a good option because you kind of take care of everything. You commit to financing these projects for a 5 or so year period before you have to make your next decision. You have a nice window in that 25-26 timeframe. If you want to finance more projects, then you've got the ability to sell more bonds and kind of continue to keep those payments level without an increase to homeowners at that time. And it gives you flexibility as well, given what's going on in the state of Illinois and all the uncertainties that everybody described. I feel like, other things aside, not just looking at the debt service costs, clearly debt service costs is the lowest in scenario 1 and it's the highest in scenario 2. I feel like scenario 3 is a nice compromise. You're taking advantage of low rates for a 20-year term, given how low they are from an historical perspective. I personally think scenario is a great middle ground for you.
But then that means in 5 years we need to go over this all over again.
You would, or do nothing. You can have another reduction.
See, our biggest thing that I feel that we are with the board, a lot of us, is nobody wants to go out to referendum. We're trying to do this without referendum, without increase, without decrease. And every single year, no matter how it is or whatever, they're always talking about their taxes going up and all the other types of stuff. And the whole thing is, the only thing that we're getting is, the cost of living. I mean, the CPI isn't giving us much of anything to even give true teachers and things like that a cost of living, let alone going out to let stuff go down by a couple $100 to then basically have to beg for it back and then really hear the crap hit the fan, so to speak. So I feel that a lot of people want to kind of keep it as even as possible to be able to do what we need to do in the district, but not be like, hey, look at us, we're spending money. Hey, look at us, we're spending money. No, we want to be good, stewards of their money and use it well.
Yeah. I think these are all good options. The good news is none of them are bad options. You just as a board have to decide what's the most important priority. They're all good options.
Okay.
I'm just going to ask one more question. When you were going over the time frame, you had said we could be virtually ready to sell bonds in July or August. Now, we don't necessarily have to sell them at that time. Is that correct? The reason being is we still have much work to be done as a district with Studio GC and all these capital projects. So can we, if we choose to, can we just be ready for the sale of bonds and then do them at a later date?
Yes, you could. You absolutely could. My advice at this point, based on what we know interest rates typically do after presidential elections, is they typically tend to spike regardless of who gets elected. Just the world sort of reacts with uncertainty. So rates tend to go up. Now, given the fact we're also in the current state we're in, I mean, who knows where rates are going to be come November, December.
Yeah.
So based on what I know right now, my advice my answer would be, yes, Kathy, you're right. You could certainly wait. I think we need to keep a close eye on the market. If it starts to go in either direction, we should be very cognizant of that. But if we get to July or August and say, you know what, rates are still really low, there's no pressing need to get in the market right now, let's hold off. We can do that. I just think we just want to be mindful of kind of all the market dynamics, and it's my job to continue to educate all of you on that. So it's probably too soon to do it on May 26th. But that June board meeting would probably be a good idea to come back to you and tell you what's been going on in the bond market. And that would be a good time to say either we're going to hit the pause button in terms of actually selling them for a while, or we think we should go ahead and just get them sold. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tammy, what is the amount of time that we have to spend this money? What's that time frame that we have to?
Yep, you have to have a reasonable expectation to spend at least 85% of the bond proceeds within 3 years.
85% in 3 years. Okay. Okay. Which we could do. All right.
Yeah.
Based on our whole thing out there. Okay.
So we could talk about this are we having a study session?
No, our May 26th meeting has to be a special meeting because of the bond petitions.
Yeah.
Okay, so can we talk about it that day? We can't vote on it. Can we talk about it though?
Yeah.
Right? Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
So what we have to vote on is which of these 3 scenarios. That's the most important thing right now, correct?
Right.
Because we've already voted, well, we already said that we wanted to go out for bond, but the question is what we have to decide on it. Before we go any further, we have to know our repayment plan, correct, Tammy?
I don't need to know that tonight, but at that May 26th meeting, if you could give me direction on which one you want to go with, that would be great. The resolutions on the agenda tonight are just specifying $5 million. That's it. It's not saying anything about the payback, debt service payments, anything.
Okay. All right, so today we can get the ball rolling is what we need to do. That's the petition, that's all that other type of stuff. So
Right.
us deciding the payback does not preclude us from like moving forward and getting the money.
That's correct.
Excellent. I think some of us were confused or making sure that we weren't like putting a big, like.
But we have to vote in June, beginning of June.
Or in 2 weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we can't vote in 2 weeks, but we can make that decision, let Tammy know, and then vote on it. Am I right?
We can vote. It's going to be a special meeting.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Any other questions for Tammy?
No, thank you for being patient with us.
Oh, of course. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you letting me have some time on your agenda. It's good to see everybody.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank
Tammy,
you.
thank you for everything.
Okay.
Stay safe.
Okay.
Take care.
I lost you. What happened?
Bye-bye.
I lost everybody.
Oh, push the button at the bottom.
What button?
I see you. We see you.
That's nice, because I don't see anybody.
Swipe left or right, maybe.
There's no button up there. There's nothing. I'm looking. Well, it's launching again is what it's doing. All I did was stand up for God's sakes.
Well, we're waiting. Just wanted to, I know we jumped kind of right into that. Just wanted to tell everyone how nice it is to see you. It's funny, when we did this last time, we said we'd make sure we had an agenda that didn't have any big items on it, big discussions. And obviously we changed that right away on this meeting, since we're all Zoom professionals now.
As I get lost in the system.
Yeah. Are you back yet, Nancy?
Oh, it's launching according to what it says here.
Okay. Do you still have your printed copy if you want to go ahead?
I do.
Approval of the consent agenda?
Yes, in the minutes of April 14th, 2020 meeting, the open session and the closed session. You have to approve them.
I'll make a motion to approve them.
Is that everything, including the financial reports and the bills, the whole consent agenda, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'll second it then.
Lori?
Yeah, sorry, I hit on mute, sorry. Ms. Davenport,
Still waiting to launch here.
Mrs. Egan,
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos,
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle,
Aye.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
and Mrs. Salzer.
Here, okay, yes. Oh, I'm back, I think.
Nancy, you've been back. If you're launching, you're opening it up to rejoin as a second time. Because since
Okay.
you can hear us and we can see you, you're still on. The screen is probably behind another screen. Like sometimes that happens.
Okay. So I can, okay. Then, I don't know how this happened, but.
You're fine. We're good.
All right. Are you ready
Okay,
for,
superintendent's report.
all right. So we did put enrollment in there. We have not seen any change whatsoever. We actually did have our first call to one of the schools about a student who had gone overseas and is now back and wants to re-enroll. Not seen any change at all at this point. And it's going to be very interesting going into next year, not really knowing if people are planning on moving. I feel like a lot of movement, or at least talk of movement, would have happened up to this point. Registration, we are hoping to get that information out this Friday to launch the online registration. So that information, Kathy and the secretaries have been working extremely hard on that to really build that up. Back when we started talking about that possibility in very late March, to moving to it actually being a reality. I know a lot of districts can talk 8 to 12 months before they launch it, and we've been able to get that done in about 6 weeks. So that's been nice to see. As far as our new students coming in kindergarten registration, right now we are looking at still making appointments to have them come in and do that and prove the residency. We would have to make sure that we have some type of protection here in the district office for DOD, as far as like a shield. And again, it would be by appointment only. We're still talking to some other districts who've been doing online registration for a long time to see if they're doing anything that is easy and effective for new students coming in. I know in my own kids' school, they were supposed to start residency in Mokina this week, and they just flat out stopped it and said, we're not even looking at it till the middle of July. We do not do that at all, because we at least want an idea of what we're looking at. But I'm sure there could be some bumps and hiccups this first time going through, but we're given 2 weeks till the end of May to make sure that people can still have that discounted price. So that if they do have trouble logging in or anything, they don't feel like they're up against the wall trying to get it done in time before they run out on it. So just want to see if anyone had any questions. Those two kind of tie in together, our enrollment and registration, but just want to see if anyone had anything.
Okay.
Adam, are families who are already enrolled and have older kids, but will have an incoming kindergartner able to get everybody registered at the same time?
We're still talking about that, but it just we're trying to see if we're going to be able to do that with still having the integrity of the kindergarten registration part with all the information that we have to get them.
Okay, I have a question. What do we do? Because there's bound to be some people that try and walk in, come to school.
What do you mean, Nancy, as far as walking, like just show up?
Yeah, I'm willing to bet there are going to be some people that come up to the school at some point. So how are we going to handle that?
Well, at this point, really, the only time our people are here is it's usually myself or Kathy, and Lori's in occasionally, and we'll answer the door. If Dodd didn't have an appointment and we were still in kind of the same scenario we are in now, she wouldn't even be here to take that residency. And I think if they come, we can give them the packet and tell them we have to schedule an appointment, and they would need to call and set that up.
Okay, now, if they do that, and then they came in, and then they missed the deadline by a day or two, are we going to give them the discount?
It's my understanding that early registration was only for those people who were already here, not new registrants.
Okay, this wouldn't be a new register. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that
I just want to make sure the what ifs.
I really think it's important that whatever dates we determine to be deadlines, that adhere to them. We want to make sure we handle all our families consistently. And so even though we don't like the idea of a family coming up for a new registration, or for that matter, a returning registration, I really think as a district, for returning, we have to have them do it online, because what's going to happen is if somebody doesn't do it online for some reason and that gets around, I think it just really needs to be consistent to work how it should be.
I just want to know what our plan is. I mean, so that's fine with me, you know, but I'm sure there's going to be somebody somewhere that's going to do it. So that's why I asked. Okay.
Yep. And then next up is our vacant positions and possible staffing needs. Both Megan and Fran have been interviewing for their primary and intermediate positions, as well as starting to look really carefully at the math coach positions. I do know Fran has someone she's bringing to me for a first grade teacher tomorrow. I feel like they are getting much better at the online interviews. It's still a weird feeling to not meet someone before possibly hiring them.
Yeah.
Again, we know what kind of teacher shortage is out there, and waiting until the possibility that we might get to shake someone's hand just doesn't make sense right now to really hold off on any hiring.
Yeah, but still, that's weird. I've done a ton of interviews, and that face-to-face, you know, you can tell so much. Yeah, it's just getting used to it. All little nuances online.
Yep.
Adam, I guess I have some last minute reserves about the math coaches that are posted. You know, only because not knowing what's going to happen as the school year starts, those positions are going to be so important to be in the classroom with teachers on I mean, we already knew that it was already going to be spread thin. And so if there's a possibility that we are not going to start in person, I think that that's really unfortunate timing for us to be hiring too.
Yeah. And
But if we do start on time, we need that person to be ready to go.
Yeah. What I would say is that I have not been very impressed with the number of people that we've had apply up to this point. So one of the things that I have been kind of going back and forth in my mind is, do we start with one and decide where that person is needed the most? I do think that building that relationship online, although extremely different, can still happen if they work really hard at it. But it could also go very poorly very quickly, and it would be hard to repair that. So what I have talked to our principals about is that we have to be really, really sure who we are looking to hire if we're going to move forward with filling those.
Yeah.
But no, I agree. This could not, the uncertainty right now could not come at a worse time to be launching 2 new coaches. That's for
I can't even imagine not starting school next year. Kindergarten kids, new preschool kids, new kindergarten kids, not being able to start at school. That's just a nightmare in itself.
Yeah, but it's not about choice or preference.
I know that, but it's still a nightmare. And I'm talking about for the kids. in starting school in that manner, you know?
Yeah.
Yep. And we'll keep you updated on anything we hear. We have not heard anything other than what's been in the news the last week. There's nothing else out there for us right now. So it's wait and see and prepare for everything.
Well, and I guess along those same lines, what about like the IAs, the paras, and the amount of paras that we have who, have now for 2 months in a row not been working, to continue that idea.
Yeah, and I will say they have been working, but nowhere near a full day of what they're used to. We do have them joining in on different video calls, but again, is it just to have them do something, or is it actually benefiting the students? So that is a conversation that we will have to have this summer. One of the things to be able to RIF a non-certified staff member, that has to be done 30 days before the school year, and there are two schools of thought with that. There's the idea that you RIF everyone and you just save that money if needed, with the chance that none of them will come back. Or is it worth knowing that we're going to definitely need them to help fill some of these gaps in our student learning, and we keep them on for hopefully if it's a month or two before we're back to in-person, and then you have your staff ready to go. So those are things that we have to look at this summer moving forward.
What a nightmare.
The one part that if we jump to 5.3 that I'm excited about is our 8th grade virtual graduation. That it's nowhere close to what a real graduation would be, but we did have our staff come in yesterday, and they had them in like half-an-hour increments, taping their different parts, and it was just fun to hear that excitement in their voices and talking about the kids. I got to record my 8th grade speech this afternoon, and it was weird, I'll admit it, but it was really exciting to think about the kids sitting with their families and watching it. And I'm sure some of them will even watch it more than once. Some of them may never watch it, but some will be watching it a couple times this summer. And you hope that that's when some of those words of encouragement sink in. I was really, really happy to see last Monday our 8th grade teachers drop off the signs throughout the community, and just driving around Chicago Ridge now is just so much fun to see the Finley signs up for our graduates, and just the smiling faces of the kids on the pictures that were posted, and some of the great feedback that the teachers and Mr. Youngberg and Mrs. Bazian received from parents, just saying how much they appreciated that. It was a really nice moment, and I hope we can continue to do that for them. So
I had a few visitors too that day.
Yeah,
It was nice. And I've heard back from some of the, right around here, some people that their kids are graduating, they were very thrilled with it.
Yeah. And I hope people will enjoy the link. It goes live that Friday night at 7:00, just like it would, and hopefully they'll share it with their family members who may not have been able to come, and they can kind of all have that experience together, even if it's not in the same house. So.
Are you going to send us the link?
Oh yeah, we'll get that out, and Gina will have that up on the front page of the website also. So we wanted to get it recorded in plenty of time, so if we had any trouble splicing things together, we could put together a really nice presentation. So
And what day is that?
that's Friday, May 29th.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. Next up, later on, you'll be asked to convert the May 26th study session to a special meeting, and that is really so that we can hold the public hearing for the bonds. Again, we don't have anyone in attendance tonight, but I would not be surprised if we had one or two trickle in that day. Again, we'll do it just like we are today, where I will be at the district office and I'll have Gino here to make sure that there aren't any tech snafus, and that if people have questions, they can email me, and then I'll make sure that I read those to the board, and if you want to respond in any way or just acknowledge that the comment was made. The other thing you'll find in your packet for 5.5 are the future board meeting dates, both the regular meetings and the study sessions. Board approval will be sought later in the meeting for that. And obviously the locations are to be determined. We don't know. We put them in there assuming we're going to meet in person. At least for now, the May 26th meeting will continue to be on Zoom. And then we will have to reevaluate both on what comes out from the governor, as well as what we feel as a board, common sense and safety, to determine what we continue to do. 5.6 is Pearson Tell. This is a progress monitoring tool for EL. We do not have a progress monitoring tool for English language students beyond really their access and WIDA scores. This is something that we can control a little bit more frequently. And what I like is that you can give these in both a small group format or individually, because the last thing I want to do is take our EL students who need to be in the classroom with other students and take them into a room and test them all day long. I think it's important to minimize that while also having some way to progress monitor. We were waiting for the official contract from them. We did not receive it. And this will probably be under $10,000 because the PD would have put it over $10,000, but we are anticipating that it will be virtual, which will put it under. But we, just to be safe and stay above par, we wanted to make sure that in the next meeting, we do get board approval for that. So. And then the last one is the consideration of non-binding class size recommendations. And per the CREA contract, I must present these to the board for consideration. There is no voting on it, but you see the numbers are very consistent with what we've had the last couple of years. And really, I think for a couple of reasons that we know the smaller class sizes that we can provide, the better education that students normally receive. That has been proven time and again. And at the same time, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. In years past, we would have already gone through registration and at least had our baseline. We don't have that at this point, but thankfully these are they are non-binding class recommendations, and that's all they really are those recommendations. So I just want you to make sure you consider it and let me know if you have any questions.
And is there any other?
I don't have any other at this time, no.
Hey, Kathy, you're up.
Okay, thank you. Okay, first thing on the agenda is the tentative amended budget, and that was posted in the window of the district office on May 8th. And per ISB guidelines, we have to publish that for 30 days minimum prior to adopting the amended budget. And so at the June board meeting, we'll be asked to adopt that. The real big change is since we were getting our evidence-based funding model conservatively, we never budget for that in September. So I made that adjustment, and so I still will be cleaning it up over the next month, but you will be asked to approve the final at the June meeting. Next couple of things on the agenda are just basic housekeeping items. We received the preliminary IMRF rate for our contribution for 2021. IMRF is one of the things that is actually on a calendar year rather than a fiscal year. So our rate is actually decreasing. It's going to be 8.36% as opposed to 9.15% for the 2020. Again, that is a preliminary, but historically the actual is going to be pretty close, and when that actual does come out, I will share that with the board. The next item, when we had our April meeting, I did inform the board that we got notification from the Lincoln Way area affiliation that our insurance premiums did not go up at all for the year. And even though I mentioned that at the last meeting, we did get the official letter. So that is in your board packet, and that is some really great news. Interest earned and township costs are in your board packet. Those are on schedule, and that's for the third quarter. The next thing on the agenda is the renewal of open kitchens. Everybody remembers that we went out for bid last year, and so this was our first full year with open kitchens, and I think overall we have been pretty satisfied with it. And per the contract, they have the right to increase that by the food away from home, which is actually for the 2021 year is 3.1%. So they are asking for a 3% rate of increase, which is actually below that. And so I will be asking the board later in the meeting to approve that contract renewal for the next school year. And then also we're going to be asking you to renew the contract for Creative Learning Systems. Creative Learning Systems is the company that launched our Smart Labs. And so we knew this going into the contract. We have an annual renewal fee. This year it is $12,350, which is down 5% because they actually just emailed us one day and said, because of the state of the economy and where everyone's at, we're going to give you 5% off. And so we're asking the board to approve that. And then there's also a renewal for MobiMax. MobiMax is another online software program that the district uses, and that is to assist in math and reading interventions at all 3 schools.
Yeah. Kathy, I'll jump in on that one. I know I sent in one of my board updates that we did definitely have some issues with this for our remote learning. We have not seen the same type of issues when we've done it in the classroom. And I think a lot of the problems were on our end of not communicating exactly how it worked and what it was being used for. So when we are in school in person, I definitely would recommend that we renew that contract.
Okay, and then every year this time we take a look at our Chromebooks and our Chromebook cart, and our technician Gino had suggested that we replace 2 Chromebook carts at each building. So that is for 60 Chromebooks at each building for 180 and 2 additional carts. And so we'll be asking the board to approve that. Now, just a heads up, we haven't started collecting our devices. So one thing that has not been factored into that number is the possibility of maybe getting some of these Chromebooks that were lent out for the last few months back in some questionable condition. So just
not get them back.
Yeah, or, so just kind of throwing that out there. But right now we're looking to replace the 180 Chromebooks with 6 carts. And then the summer food service program, I'm really excited that we were able to continue feeding our communities over these last couple of months. It was something we never embraced before. And I just, the thought of being able to feed community members, if they're actually coming to a school to get cold meals, they need the food. And I just think it's wonderful. And hats off to all the lunch hostesses that really just kind of help put that together. And so what we'd be asking the board to do is to approve the summer food service program throughout the summer. It's always been available. We just never, embraced it. And the cost of reimbursement for the meals actually exceeds the amount that we need to pay Open Kitchens, and more than likely will cover the salary cost for our lunch hostesses. So in my mind, it's kind of a win-win. Now, the only thing I do envision is maybe structuring it a little differently. Right now we're having meals daily, and we do serve a breakfast and a lunch, and family members come up and they take a breakfast and a lunch. And Dr. Thorns and I have been, in discussions about, do we restructure that where maybe on Mondays, mom comes up and picks up meals for Monday and Tuesday. That way the community doesn't have that exposure, that mom doesn't have to go out of the house twice, and then also it lessens the exposure for our lunch hostesses. So even though the parameters of how it look are not set up, I would be asking the board to approve that to continue over the summer.
Tiffany, I see you have your hand up.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. When people come in are our hostesses wearing masks and gloves?
I honestly haven't seen them since May 1st, but I know they were definitely wearing gloves. And when we set this up, it was very strategic that the lunch hostesses are well positioned behind the meal pickup, because the lunches are on one table and the breakfasts and the milks are on another. So mom just literally goes, and takes what they need.
So they're a significant amount away from them. But the
Yes.
people coming in, are we insisting they have masks on?
You know, that's a
They-
good question.
Yeah. And-
It's all
and-
being done outside.
Yeah, they're not coming
Definitely
inside.
outside.
So my question was, well, more of just a thought-provoking question. Not a question. Anyways, Richards is doing pickups only Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
Okay.
They're limiting the number of days. And I am wondering about the need to have lunch hostesses being the ones to do this when everything is coming pre-packaged.
Mhm.
And it seems like something that, you know, as the custodians are already there and they're the ones setting up the table, it is no big, they're the ones opening the boxes and taking the empty boxes. I just don't know. Well, I would like to suggest it be looked at whether there actually needs to be a hostess being paid to stand there for people to take their meals versus just having somebody who's setting up and taking it back down.
Yeah, and keep in mind, the lunch hostesses are hopefully doing primarily the bulk of the work. They actually, they break down the boxes and, you know, and set everything up. Now, the only thing is if we have custodians do that, it will take away from their cleaning. You know, their regular summer duties. And then my only other thing is it's now the custodians are in a contract. So I don't really know if we have the flexibility to add that to their responsibilities.
Right. I mean, I guess I just think like the reason for the hostess is to be the sanitary and putting it, there's nothing to put out. There's nothing they're putting
Correct.
together. Everything is coming boxed. And I'm assuming some of the summer work is getting done already currently from custodians and that, you know, their normal summer work is already, they should have a good jump start on it. So it's just food for thought as we're trying to figure out how to make some cuts. It seems like those are some things that could easily be done. And I'm not suggesting a custodian stand there for an hour or two to watch people pick up foods. I'm actually suggesting that wouldn't even need to be done. Like if somebody wants to take 5 meals instead of 2 meals, so be it. You know, it's always been put out that it's a first come, first serve anyways. Like I'm just offering another suggestion to think about. That's all.
Okay.
Someone needs to be there.
But isn't the custodians, like you said, they're under contract, but lunch aides are getting paid either there or at home?
For now, they are. Yes.
It'll look, it'll look a little different during the summer because and under no obligation to continue salaries for the lunch hostesses without paying. So we would be paying them additional.
Yeah. And one of the things, Greg, just as you bring that up, we are waiting to find out still from the state is let's say we start remotely next year, are we still required to pay people like we have been this year? And that has not been sent down to us yet. So.
Well, the odds are we will be.
That would be my guess. So.
And there's also a couple other paperwork and ordering items that the lunch hostesses are responsible for. They have to put in the orders with Open Kitchens. They have to submit the count for the food because then we do the reimbursement claim. Okay, I do actually have 2 others, and it's really just to give you an update on the 2 construction projects we have going on, although they're very small. Studio GC did have a virtual pre-bid non-mandatory meeting last week for the fire alarm panels. And they were online, I was online, the engineer, and they had a couple vendors. And so that gives the vendors opportunities to ask any questions. And then that bid will actually be officially opened next week. It'll be May 19th, a week from today. And Corey will physically be in the district office because there are still guidelines that they have to be present. Someone has to be able to accept the bids. So we will be asking the board to approve that as well at the May 26th meeting. And then the other thing, we've been talking about our secured entrances. I just want to let you know that Corey and other vendors have walked through the district office and all 3 buildings. We do not have any costs at this time, but those will be forthcoming. So they're working on that as well.
Oh, so lock the, okay, yeah.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's all I have.
Okay, old business. Potential board action to post this, for a second reading or adopt policies.
Yeah, we presented these policies at the last meeting, and unlike most of the ones we've done, these are really, a lot of them are just changes in language for legal references. The big questions are for 2125, board member compensation, and does the board reimburse for baggage fees? I would recommend yes, as I talked at the last meeting, that it's just become part of travel if we ever did travel by plane. And just before you do take any possible action on this, we have received word that the Title IX requirements are drastically changing, that over the next couple months, we are going to have to change just about every single policy that we have with Title IX. And so that is going to be a lot of policies coming down the pipe that right now have to be in compliance by August 14th, even though we have not received any word from anybody, from press or anywhere. There are some already people trying to slow that down and not make it by August 14th, but we do need to be prepared for that. So
How are they changing Title IX?
It really actually makes it more difficult for a person who believes that they have been sexually harassed to prove it or to really bring a case forward, in my understanding. I did a quick 25-minute webinar the other day, but we expect a lot more materials to start coming through. I think the document itself was like 168 pages, so I'll be honest, I did not read it, but just hearing from other people that those are some of the changes that are coming.
Is there anything else significant, or is that the...
A lot of it will just deal with how our complaint managers handle it. There's different new forms that are going to have to be created. So there's just a lot of paperwork from it.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Is there anything else? I have to go through these one by one. Am I right, Adam?
Yes.
Okay. So 2125, board member compensation expenses. Does the board reimburse for baggage fees? And the recommendation is yes. We need a motion.
We can just do it all at once, Nance.
Okay, so I just read them?
Yes.
Okay, 2160, board attorney, and we're keeping the ones we have, right?
Yeah, but the policy is just it's a 5-year review of it. So.
Okay, 2125, Exhibit 1, board member expense reimbursement form. Exhibit 2, expense approval form. 2160E, exhibit, checklist for selecting a board attorney. 450, payment procedures, 5.56. Expenses, required question, does the board reimburse for baggage fees? That same thing?
It is very similar. It's the same question, and it basically, the answer has to be in both policies. So I would recommend whatever you choose on one, you choose on the other one.
It's just worded a little differently, but it's the same darn thing. Okay, 5.150, personal records. 5.6, Exhibit 1, employee expense reimbursement form. Exhibit 2, employee estimate expense approval form. Are they changing the amount?
The expense form, there's just some of the language in there, and it really goes to, it's called, basically the grants can now be part of the travel reimbursement if you're traveling for something with grants.
Okay. 5.280, duties and qualifications. 6.135, accelerated placement program. We don't have that. What do we got? Okay, 6.280, grading and promotion. 7.7, attendance and truancy. 7.130, student rights and responsibilities. 7.325, student fundraising activities. 8.10, connection with the community. 8.80, gifts to district. 8.110, public suggestions and concerns. 8.30, visitors to and conduct on school property or communications using district-provided telephone or electronic email systems. Okay, can I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Can I interject to just clarify? We have to make sure the motion is to adopt with the administrative recommendations, if that is how you want to proceed.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Hellman's making that motion.
Yes,
Is there
I
a
am.
second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. Hellman,
Yes.
Ms. Davenport,
Yes.
Mrs. Egan,
Aye.
Mrs. Lammel,
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos,
Aye.
and Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. So we're good on that, right? We go down to new business. We have no other. Potential board actions to display tentative amended budget. Okay, motion.
I'll make the
I'll
motion.
make the motion. I'll second.
Mrs. Lammel,
Aye.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
Ms. Davenport,
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos,
Aye.
Mrs. Egan, Mrs. Egan,
Yes.
Aye.
and Mrs. Salzer.
Resolution, this has to do with what Tammy was talking about, am I right? Is that it, or is this something else? No, something else.
Yes, no, that's it. Yep.
8.2,
Yeah.
resolution declaring the intention, to issue a $5 million working cash fund bond for the purpose of increasing working cash fund of the district and directing that notice of such intention to be published in the manner provided by law. Motion.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Just to be sure, I have Mrs. Lammel on the motion and Mr. Hellman on the second.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, Mrs. Petropoulos,
Aye.
Mrs. Lammel,
Aye.
Mrs. Egan,
Aye.
Ms. Davenport,
Aye.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. Potential board action to approve First Amendment to the financial advisory agreement with PMA.
We skipped one.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
we skipped one.
Oh, I'm
We're on
sorry.
8.3.
I checked the wrong one last time. I was checking them as we go. Resolution calling a public hearing concerning the intent of the Board of Education of the district to sell a $5 million working cash bonds for the purpose of increasing working cash fund of the district. Motion.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
That's Susan.
Who
Okay,
second?
Tiffany seconded.
thank you. And again, just to make sure, because this is going on our bond documentation, which are all legal documents, I have Mrs. Lammel on the motion and Mrs. Egan on the second.
Yes.
Okay, Mrs. Egan. Mrs. Egan?
Tiff.
Aye. Aye,
Thank you.
aye, still yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
It was
Ms.
frozen.
Davenport?
Aye.
Mrs. Lammel?
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos?
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. Okay, now 8.4. Potential board action to approve First Amendment of the financial advisory agreement with PMA. Motion.
I'll
I'll
make
make-
a motion.
Who
I
just
heard
made it?
Mrs. Egan on the motion. Was there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, then I got Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Egan?
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Hellman?
Aye.
Ms. Davenport?
Aye.
Mrs. Lammel?
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. Potential board action to approve the contract renewal agreement with Open Kitchens for the 2020-2021 school year. Motion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Ms. Davenport?
Aye.
Mrs. Egan?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos?
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle,
Aye.
and Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. Potential board action to approve the contract with Creative Learning Systems in the amount of $12,350. Motion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll
Second.
second it.
Okay, I'm sorry, was that Mrs. Egan or Mrs. Lammle on that?
Lammle.
Thank you. Mrs. Lammle,
Aye.
Mrs. Egan,
I think she's freezing.
Aye.
thank you. Mrs.
Aye.
Petropolis,
Aye.
Ms. Davenport,
Aye.
Mr. Hillman,
Aye.
and Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. Okay, potential board action to approve contract with MobiMax in the amount of $10,485. Motion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Hillman,
Aye.
Mrs. Egan,
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle,
Aye.
Mrs. Petropolis,
Aye.
Ms. Davenport,
Aye.
Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. 8.8, potential board action to establish regular meeting dates, times, and places, study session dates, times, and places for 2020-2021 school year.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Mrs. Egan,
Aye.
Mrs. Petropolis,
Aye.
Mr. Hillman,
Aye.
Ms. Davenport,
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle,
Aye.
and Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. 8.9, potential board action to approve contract with IT Savvy LLC in the amount of $45,751.38 for Chromebooks and carts. Motion.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Mrs. Petropolis,
Aye.
Mr. Hillman,
Aye.
Mrs. Egan,
Aye.
Ms. Davenport,
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle,
Aye.
Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. Potential board action to change the May 26th, 2020 study session into a special board meeting. Motion.
I'll
I'll
make
make
a
the
motion.
motion.
Oh, that's fine.
I
I'll
think I
second.
had Mrs. Lammle on the motion. And
I'll make the second.
okay, thank you. Mrs. Lammle,
Aye.
Ms. Davenport,
Aye.
Mr. Hillman,
Aye.
Mrs. Petropolis,
Aye.
Mrs. Egan,
Aye.
and Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. Potential board action to offer the summer food service program during the summer. Motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I'll second it.
Okay, I got Mrs. Egan on the second. Mr. Hillman,
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle,
Aye.
Ms. Davenport,
Aye.
Mrs. Egan,
Aye.
Mrs. Petropolis,
Aye.
and Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. We have no other information. Opportunity for visitors to speak. There are no visitors.
We have no one.
No one. President's prerogative. I don't know about you guys, but I'm about batty and bouncing my head off the wall about now. I'm hoping things are going a little bit better for you guys, but with any luck, this will be over in some kind of timely fashion. I have no clue, so I can't even offer encouragement at this point, so I'm sorry. So I don't know what else to say. Hope for the best.
That works.
Yeah. So
Um,
adjourn to the closed session. Dr. Thorns, you want to go with that?
Yes, discussion of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. However, a meeting to consider an increase in compensation to a specific employee of a public body that is subject to the Local Government Wage Increase Transparency Act may not be closed and shall be open to the public and posted and held in accordance with the Open Meetings Act as defined in the Open Meetings Act, Section 2C1. The discussion of collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or representatives, or deliberations considering salary schedules for one or more classes of employees as defined in Section 2C2. And the discussion of minutes of prior meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act as defined in Section 2C21 for the purpose of review, approval, and release of such minutes. We will not be discussing any imminent or probable litigation, and we will not be discussing any security or safety or disciplinary actions.
Okay, it is 8:19.
I'll make the motion to go into closed session.
I'll second the motion.
Mrs. Egan? Mrs. Egan? Mrs. Petropoulos?
Aye.
Hi.
Ms. Davenport?
Aye.
Mr. Hillman?
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle?
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer?
Aye,
Hey, guys.
okay.
Thank you, Lori.
Good to
I
see
have to-
everyone. Have a good
Bye,
night.
Lori. I have to
Thanks,
step
Lori.
away for a minute. I'll be right back.
I know.
Thank you.
I'm gonna
Bye,
run
Lori.